Okay, everyone, welcome to our March 12th Planning Commission meeting. And to start things off, if you would follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll go ahead and do our roll call.
Here.
Here. Here. Here. Okay, we'll have our report from Planning Director, EJ.
We only have one thing to talk about today, and it's our upcoming Planning Commission hearings. And two I want to talk about. The next one is scheduled for March 26th, and we are going to Tahoe finally. There's three things right now on the agenda. Faulkner Garage, which was the use permit and variance for the underground garage. That's going to come back. The parties have apparently come to some form of agreement, and so we'll be able to hear that at that Tahoe meeting. The other thing, there's going to be two updates. One is going to be from Department of Public Works on snow removal and some of the issues they're facing up there with properties. And then also we're going to have Alex Fish give an update on the Village at Squaw Valley specific plan. So March 26th, 2 weeks from today, we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're going to take the van. Anybody, so what I'll do, I'll have Kathy coordinate with you over the next week to see who's interested in going up in the van or other modes of transportation, and then we'll go from there. So 2 weeks after that, a month from now, the April 9th Planning Commission meeting is going to be down here in Auburn. And the projects that are on tap for that right now are the ponds. That's the quarry next to the quarry ponds down in Granite Bay, where they're proposing the event center and these commercial working lofts is what they're calling them. Morgan Knolls is another project that is out in West Placer on a big corner of PFE Road and Willergra Road. That's a 61-lot subdivision proposed down there. And then the last one, Orchard at Penryn, which you may recall was approved by the commission and also the board. That was a 150-unit multifamily residential unit. They actually came back in, revised their project to reflect a single-family residential unit project. The number of residential units was reduced from 150 down to 54. So that project will be coming back on April 9th as well. So things are pretty busy. I think you met one of our newest planners today, our newest hires who works up in Tahoe, Heather Beckman. So we're happy to have her on board as well to help us with the onslaught of development projects that are being submitted. So we're thankful for that. That's all I have. Any questions from you? Otherwise, we can get started.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment on anything except anything that's before us today, now's your opportunity. And seeing none, I guess we will go to our item number 1, Squaw Valley Siberia chairlift replacement, conditional use permit and mitigated negative declaration. Okay, Steve?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Steve Yelna from the Tahoe office. The project to bring before you today is a conditional use permit and a related mitigated negative declaration for the Squaw Valley Siberia chairlift replacement. Just in order to orient you, where this project is located is within the Squaw Valley ski resort just west of 89 Squaw Valley Road in the Olympic Valley area. What this project is a replacement of the existing Siberia lift, and it's currently a 4-person chair. The new proposal would bring this up to a 6-person high-speed chair lift. The chair replacement will be within the same existing alignment, just in order to orient you to where the different chairlifts are. Obviously, the proposed chairlift is in this alignment here. Here's Gold Coast, and here is Headwall. So what the project will do is, like I said, it goes in the same lift alignment. 14 of the existing towers will be removed. Up to 9 of the existing foundations will be reutilized for the new towers. Those that are to remain, the foundations will remain in place, and this helps to reduce the amount of grading associated with the project. The upper and lower terminals will stay, and will be the new technology, new structures, but it'll be located in the same exact same location as the existing towers. So here's some slides from this past summer, and here's the lower terminal as well. This project is located within the Forest Recreation Zone District. All ski runs and ski lifts within the zoning classification require a conditional use permit. Even though this is a replacement, this still requires a conditional use permit, so that's the reason for the application before you. The first step along this process was to conduct the analysis of the potential environmental impacts of this project. That analysis identified the following areas where mitigation was required. Air quality, primarily relative to the construction activities of replacing the chairlift. Biological resources, there are some trees that will be removed in order to accommodate the additional width of the new chairlift. Geology and soils, of course there's going to be some grading for the new towers that will be added in the different location than the existing, and hydrology and water quality. Of course, that has to do with the grading activity as well. The mitigated negative declaration was circulated for review and comment. We did receive some comments from Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. This had to do with the potential for impacts to the wetlands area. And staff has subsequently had conversations with the water board, and they no longer have any concerns with that. But one of the towers is located close to the wetlands area, but it's not within the wetlands itself. So this project also did go to the Squaw Valley Municipal Advisory Council on February 5th. The majority of the comments from the public had to do with just the overall operation of the chairlift and summertime activities. What would happen with the whether the old foundations for the towers that weren't going to be reutilized, whether they were going to be removed or left in place. Not terribly involved discussion. At the end of that, the vote was a unanimous vote, 6-0, to approve the project as proposed. So with all that, staff has determined that the findings for approval can be made, and our recommendation to your commission is that you adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the conditional use permit subject to the findings and recommended conditions of approval. And with all that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Just one question. Did you say several of those foundations aren't going to be used, right? You said, are they going to be left?
They will be left in place. It's actually less of an impact than it would take to remove the foundations in place and then refill the soil. So they'll be ground down to grade level, but be left in place otherwise.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I see this wetland area, at least on the map, it looks like it's right below the top of the
Correct.
lift.
Yeah.
Is that part of the, well, there's a little pond over there too. Is that part of the snowmaking facility, or is that just a natural wetland?
No, I think that's just a natural wetland. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Mike, I see there, do you have any comments, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, the Siberia chair, the original chair, was installed in the mid-'80s, and at the time it was very cutting-edge technology, and this detachable chair technology allows the chairlift that the skiers and riders sit in to come off of the haul rope, which is able to move at a higher speed, and it's moved through the terminal with a conveyance mechanism. And that allows the guest to load the chair while it's moving slowly, and then the chair rejoins the haul rope, which can thereby travel at a higher speed. So that was a very exciting new technology in '85 when this chair went in. We think of this chair a bit like a classic car. It's very well maintained, it's safe, but it is substantially less reliable than a new car, and it's also very hard to get parts for, and it doesn't perform to the same level that the new technology does. So we're looking forward to replacing it. Unlike a classic car, old chairlifts don't have an intrinsic aesthetic appeal. So function is really what our skiers are interested in. And this replacement would be with a detachable six-person chair, very similar to the Big Blue chair that we put in a couple of seasons ago. And it will run and operate much better in the winds that we experience on the Sierra Crest. And with that, I'd answer any questions that you might have.
I'm just curious, it doesn't necessarily impact what we're trying to make as far as a decision, but it appeared that I read that it said the capacity is actually going to be less with the new chair than the old. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, that's true. So the theoretical capacity of the current chairlift with 4 passengers is 3,000 people per hour. And the way that theoretical capacity is reached is by having the carriers, or the chairs and the hangers and the grips, spaced more closely together on the line. This new 6-passenger chair, although each chair will have a higher capacity, the carriers will be farther apart. In practice, we never approached that 3,000 person per hour theoretical limit with Siberia because indeed the chairs are close together and the folks can't get up to the load board so that they're able to consistently put 4 people on the chair. So sometimes we have empty chairs go up, or oftentimes we'll have chairs go up with just 2 or 3 riders. The idea behind the 6-passenger chair with the greater spacing is that we expect a higher practical and realistic operating capacity. So while theoretically lower, it'll probably be more efficient and more effective in getting folks up the hill than the current chairlift.
Okay, it looks like you've answered all the questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close it off and bring it back to the commission for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, barring any discussion, I would be happy to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit to allow the replacement of existing Siberia lift within the same lift alignment, the removal of 14 towers, and removal and replacement of the upper and lower terminals in the same locations, subject to the CEQA findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
Have a second? Motion second.
Commissioner Moss, could you clarify, did you make also a determination on the mitigated neg deck?
Absolutely.
So
That we adopt the negative declaration.
I guess this is
I will
second
second
stage.
that.
Okay, roll call.
Hey, just a minute, I have one editorial comment.
Okay.
Okay. It's a minor one, very minor. On condition number 7, it says truck routes are to be located across existing logging roads. And, I kind of perceived that was on, but maybe there's some way they're going to go across the roads. Huh?
Apologies. Sarah Gilmore, Engineering and Surveying. Yes, the intent is to be not across, but upon the same path to reduce impacts.
Yeah, so the intent is that they use existing logging roads
Yes,
and not create new roads.
correct.
So they're not going across them, they're going on them.
Whenever possible.
Okay.
Okay. With that said, do our roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. And if anybody should want to appeal this, the appeal fee is $546, and you have 10 calendar days to file the appeal. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead to our 1010 item, Tarantino Residence, Calpine Meadows Estates, subdivision unit number 9, subdivision modification and categorical exemption. Okay, Heather?
Good morning. I'm Heather Beckman from the Tahoe office, and I'm pleased to be here before you today. So as you mentioned, I'll be presenting the Tarantino Residence map modification. The property is located at 1118 Snowcrest Road in Alpine Meadows, and it is zoned RSPD equals 3, or residential plan development with a density of 3 dwelling units per acre. It's located within the Alpine Meadows Estate subdivision, unit number 9, and that subdivision has a mapped 20-foot front setback. And so it's modification to that setback that is before you today for review. The property has an existing single-family dwelling, which you can see in the site plan, and an uncovered parking deck. The property is also surrounded by existing single-family dwellings as well. The proposed project is a detached 2-car garage and a connecting covered walkway from the garage to the residence. And the parking deck is proposed to remain. There are several constraints to this property. The first of which is that it is a steep downsloping lot, so it's a 27% slope. The existing house that you can see is located relatively close to the front property line. It's outside of the setback, but relatively close to the front property line. So therefore, there's not much space to accommodate a garage in front of the house. And then lastly, you'll see that the existing residence is actually at an angled orientation to the front property line. So as a result, there's very limited actual space where new development can occur. So the proposed project for the detached garage, the applicant and staff actually worked through several different alternatives. And what you have before you was determined to be the minimum departure to meet the project goals for the garage. Most specifically, this design does minimize the driveway frontage at the right-of-way, so it's meeting engineering and surveying division requirements for that, as well as maintaining a 20-foot separation from the edge of pavement to the front of the face of the garage structure. So with that in mind, that's the proposal that's before you. I did research a number of permits in the surrounding area and saw that there have been a number of previous approvals for residential or garage encroachments into the front setback. So were this to be approved, it would not be granting a special privilege to this property. So with all that in mind, that is the garage proposal that's before you. Specifically, the applicant is seeking a reduction of the setback to 6.5 feet to the structure and 3.5 feet to eaves. And here are the two of the elevations. Oh, and I did forget to mention that there is going to be a storage space below the proposed garage. Here's an aerial photograph that shows you the location. The number 8 in the address there is about the approximate location of the garage. But what's also important to note here is that you'll see, in particular in this house here, that there is development that's close to the front property line, much like is being proposed for this project. Here are a couple photos of the existing house and showing where the proposed garage would go. And just as a reminder, the parking deck would remain. So with that, staff recommends that you make the following two approvals. First, to determine that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA per a Class 3 finding. And secondly, to approve the subdivision modification to allow for a matched front setback of 6.5 feet to the structure and 3.5 feet to the eaves, as measured from the front property line. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well, if you have questions.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to comment on this?
Thank you. I should have no comment unless you have a question. The house is located in...
Oh, okay, if you could just state your
Okay, great.
name for us. If you could just state your name that you don't have
Julie
any.
Waterworth, Whittles Engineering. I'm representing Dawn and Darcy Tarantino.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that'd like to comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Are you going to get it right this time?
take another stab at this. I would like to make a motion that we determine the project to be categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA sections as listed, and that we approve the subdivision modification to allow for a mapped front setback of 6½ feet to the structure, 3½ feet to the eaves as measured from the front property line for the construction of a new detached garage with storage below and connecting driveway subject to the findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and do roll call.
Mr. Sevison's absent, Mr. Gray absent, Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Riccucci?
Yes.
Mr. Denayo?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. If anybody appeal this, they have 10 calendar days to file, and the fee is $546. Okay. Thank you. We'll go on to our final item today, Rio Bravo Wood Waste Chip and Grind Conditional Use Permit and categorical exemption. Steve?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Alex Fish with the Planning Services Division. It's a rare day. We're on the third item, and we're basically on time, so happy to see that. The project before you today is a conditional use permit for the existing Rio Bravo power plant located in the Sunset Industrial Area to implement a wood waste chip and grind use. And that use would be used to help to improve the reliability of their fuel sourcing for their project. So in brief, I'm going to go through and orient you all as to the project location and its particulars. This here is the project site. It's located at 3100 Thunder Valley Court, just about a half-mile south of the casino here. Athens Avenue to the north. We have Industrial Boulevard to the east, as well as the Highway 65 corridor. The Placer Parkway project eventually will come through this area. And to the south of the site is the historic Formica manufacturing facility, Ace Hardware Distribution, and then the Pasquetti Industrial Park to the west. Zooming in on the site, just want to give you all a little overview of what the site operations entail. This is a 49.5 acre project site. The power plant facility itself is here. It pulls access off of Thunder Valley Court. You go through a scale area here where trucks that are coming in to tip their loads will take weight. They come in, circulate in this area. This is a tipping area with a conveyor that feeds out to the fueling yard. And what you have out here are the fuel cells that are being prepared that would supply the power, or rather the raw materials that power the power plant. You have a number of 35-foot tall windscreens that are located on site here, adjacent to the tipping area here as well as here. There's one on the north property boundary. This is a little bit of an older aerial, so you can't see all of them, but there is also one here on this north property boundary and down the westerly property boundary here, and those help to keep the fugitive dust emissions down as well as to screen the facilities. I should mention that we're coming back to you all with this item today. We had continued it from the April 24th, 2014 Commission hearing. And the reason for that continuance was that we had realized that the applicant had not placed the notification posters on the property at that time. The reason it's taken so long to get back to you all is that in the intervening period we had a number of issues to discuss. Principally was Placer Parkway and its potential
to be affected by the project as well as the project to affect it. And so I will describe that in a little bit more detail later on in the report. By way of background, this power plant processes, it incinerates about 280,000 tons of boiler fuel annually, and that is in the form of 4-inch or smaller chips, and that is used to meet a continuous output of about 24.4 megawatts of power, and that power is purchased by Pacific Gas and Electric through a 30-year power purchase agreement dating back to 1989. This is a site plan showing kind of the overall operations as they exist now and how this proposed project would affect them. As noted earlier, the project would implement a mobile wood grinder at the power plant in order to process a portion of the fuels on site. In total, that would be about 80,000 tons of the annual boiler fuel that would be displaced by this proposal. And the proposal would be to receive the fuel in unprocessed form of woody biomass, C&D waste, come into the site as is done now, weigh on the scales, come into the circulation area to turn around, come back, tip the load of the unprocessed material out here at this pad, and the grinder would be located here. It's a mobile grinder, I'll show you in the next slide. And basically the only permanent facilities required for this piece of equipment is a service line power drop to the site to provide the 400 amp service to run it. This is a view of the tub grinder. It is a trailer mounted unit, and some of the particulars of this tub rotates around like this, and the grinding equipment is at the bottom of it. Conveyor chute discharges the material as it goes up. Some of the operational characteristics of the grinder, as far as noise and dust, it's fairly efficient and low impact in those regards because the effect of placing all of this fuel into the tub on top of the grinder is that the dust generating activities are down below where the grinding is occurring. There's also water suppression nozzles that will be placed above the tub and on the conveyor chute to help keep the dust down. And it also helps to mitigate the noise of the machine because that unit is being covered up, the operational part, by the actual material that's sitting on top of it. This grinder would operate approximately 2 days a week, 2 12-hour days, 50 weeks per year. Operational hours are proposed between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., and the grinder would be shut down 2 weeks per year for regularly scheduled maintenance, during which a diesel grinder would be used in its place. The project would be required to receive a new source review authority to construct permit from the Air District, and that permit would require the operator to log the amount of material processed in the tub grinder each calendar quarter and to record the daily and quarterly hours of operation of the grinder. Those records would be made available to the district upon inspection request and would also be submitted to the district annually. I'm going to briefly go through and describe some of the overall analyses that staff performed for this project, just to make sure that we hit the high points. As far as fuel sourcing, the power plant currently receives approximately 50 tractor-trailer deliveries of processed material each day. Under this proposal, about a third of that would instead arrive as unprocessed material. The applicant estimates that because of the unconsolidated nature of the material, that it would increase their daily truck trips by approximately 2, so approximately 52 truck trips per day. As I said a moment ago, the tub grinder is surprisingly does not have a significant amount of noise generation associated with it. We received a noise study with the application, and what that noise study determined is that this tub grinder, in its location approximately 250 feet south of the north property boundary, would result in about a 65 decibel noise level at the nearest property boundary. As stated in the report, industrial properties are insensitive to noise. This is an industrial property. However, it is surrounded by industrial park property, and that has a 75 decibel limit at the receiving property boundary. So the tub grinder would operate well below that noise threshold. As I mentioned a moment ago, the project will continue its current dust control measures to maintain the opacity limit at the property boundary, including regular watering of the yard area and fuel piles at various stages of processing. I mentioned the dust suppression nozzles both over the tub and the conveyor output. This project was reviewed not only by the Planning Services Division Air Quality staff, but also by the Placer County Air Pollution Control District staff. And the district determined that the daily operational emissions of this unit would be well under their threshold of 10 pounds per day for PM10, which is particulate dust emissions, and it would produce approximately 3.6 pounds per day per 12-hour operational day. So we're well beneath the threshold there. As I mentioned, there will be an authority to construct permit from the district, but no additional permitting beyond that. With regard to Placer Parkway, as I mentioned, that is an east-west regional transportation corridor that will go from State Route 65 over here to the east and continue out, I believe, approximately 8 miles to the Sutter County line and then connect up to Interstate 99. Department of Public Works staff, planning staff, and the applicant traded a number of notes back and forth on this facility. We wanted to ensure that the project would not have the potential to interfere with either the construction or operation of the Placer Parkway corridor. The analysis of that actual physical construction project is going forward right now, and vice versa. The applicant wanted assurances that the corridor construction and operation was not going to impact its proposal to implement this use. And ultimately, DPW staff and the applicant did agree that neither affects the other. In 2012, the Board of Supervisors did approve a CFD to expand fire services in the Sunset Industrial Area. This project would be required conditionally to annex into the CFD prior to operation. There is a condition of approval in your packets for that. And lastly, wanted to touch on odor impacts of this facility. As noted in the staff report, this is an existing operation. It's been in continuous operation since 1989. It is a biomass power plant, and it does receive raw biomass materials for use in fueling its boilers. And so there are some odors associated with it, and the most common odors associated with this facility is that of wood, and grasses and other types of woody biomass and vegetative matter. And under certain weather and atmospheric conditions, it can have some unpleasant smells. I personally have been out in the Sunset Industrial Area quite a bit over the course of my career, and I can't say for certain if I've ever experienced unpleasant smells from this facility. There are a number of odor generators in this area, and certainly I have smelled them from time to time. I was out around this facility a couple of weeks ago, several days after the most recent rainstorm, when we had a warmer day when you would expect wood decomposition to be a little bit higher. Spent some time driving around, and predominantly what I got was what I've gotten in the past, and that is it's a smell of wood. But that said, the applicant is proposing to implement a new use, and the Planning Services Division, the DRC, think it would be appropriate to have the applicant implement an odor impact minimization plan. That is basically a standard procedural document of good housekeeping practices that document good site management activities, how you manage your fuel supply, load tipping, and other operations so that you don't unnecessarily generate unpleasant odors. And then, of course, it has procedures that would document complaints and responses to complaints and staff's analysis of those complaints, and it would also require submission to the planning director annually for his review during the course of operation of this project. Lastly, I'll note that you do have several letters attached to your report from, and those are from the Waste Management Authority, Thunder Valley Casino, and also a letter from the United Auburn Indian Community. And in staff's opinion, all of the issues raised in those letters has been addressed in the project analysis and conditions of approval that we've placed before the Commission. And so based on this, staff recommends, the DRC recommends that the Planning Commission determine that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA and to approve the conditional use permit subject to the findings in staff's report. And real quickly, I apologize, I do have just a couple of photographs here showing the site. This first photograph, this is on Thunder Valley Court, looking directly south at the facility at about the midpoint between the casino and the facility. Similarly, this is looking back towards the casino. You can see the hotel here. From the approximate driveway location of Rio Bravo. This is a close-up view of what you would see as you're driving down into the facility. This is the windscreen. These trees screen the project area and the fuel yard. And this is the location where the grinder would be located, and as you can see, there are windscreens on either side of it. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Commission has. I do want to mention that Travis Finn, the applicant, is also here as well.
Okay. Alex, if I'm not mistaken on this, we approved, and I couldn't tell you back when, but they were using coke, I think, along with the raw materials and stuff, and upped it. Now, with this grinder on site, is that going to lower the use of coke down? I mean, has it finally gotten to a point where they're getting enough of the waste material into?
I may be incorrect in this, and I'll have to defer to Travis for the specifics. I believe it was a test pilot program, and it was something that the district and Rio Bravo had partnered with and brought forward to the county, and it had been approved. And I am not certain if that is still ongoing. My understanding is I believe it is. Is it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one quick question. Is the odor monitoring at Rio Bravo now with this new conditional permit here the same as the MRF?
What the MRF has is an odor impact minimization plan. That's this manual of good housekeeping practices that I described. And they have also, both of these on a voluntary basis, and I should note that they are also a composting facility.
Right.
This is not a composting facility. But they also have what's called Odotech Continuous Odor Monitoring System. I don't know the particulars of that, and I believe a representative from the Waste Management Authority is here,
Okay.
and can potentially answer some of those questions.
Okay, I just wanted to maybe clarify the tub grinder itself. It probably doesn't produce a whole lot of odor, but it's really the boilers and the burning of stuff that creates the odors that most people notice. Is that correct?
To my understanding, it's actually the fuel piles.
What?
To my understanding, that it's actually the fuel piles, the fuel cells that are being built out of the biomass before it's burned that is the main source of odor.
Okay.
The Travis, 1,700 degrees? Is that the?
Yeah, the boiler operates at about 1,600 degrees.
And so it's emissions. A lot of what you see that comes out of there is water vapor because of that. But I'm not an expert on that. I don't want to purport to know all about that. That might be a better condition for the applicant to answer. But my understanding is the main source of odors is actually the fuel piles. It's the fuel material that has yet to be burned.
Okay, so basically by putting the odor management plan or the process in place is really kind of a change to the original conditional use permit. And trying to connect the tub grinder with, it's a good plan, but I'm just trying to connect the tub grinder with the odor management part of the process.
And a lot of the basis of that is, when this facility was originally constructed in 1989, it was really out on its own. It was far, far away from development, And it was in a location where it really didn't have, the potential to impact sensitive land uses with odors. That obviously has changed quite a bit in recent years, particularly with the growth in Rockland and Lincoln and Roseville. And at this point, because there are so many odor generators in the area, we felt that it was appropriate to bring this facility incrementally up to a standard that would provide some proactive responsiveness on its part to document its own odor generation issues and then report those to us. It is a request, so to speak. So,
Okay, so it's part of the bigger picture of the operation and
Yes.
not tied with the...
it is being tied to this use, but it is part of the bigger picture of the overall operation of the facility.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman? Alex, how come this is 2 days a week only?
The limitation is based upon the amount of material that they would process and how much time it would take to process that material. The other part of it is, frankly, that if it was a more intensive use, let's say that they wanted to produce all of the material on site, they wanted to receive all of it in unprocessed wood waste, there is certainly the potential, as this use would increase, that they could potentially trip over a CEQA threshold and that the county would have to analyze this. At this small scale, it's fairly easy to check off the list and say this does not trip over any of these
So I guess-
thresholds. At a bigger scale, 5 days a week, unlimited processing, it potentially would.
Was this all the applicant asked for up front, or did this get whittled down to this?
This was their proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would the applicant like to address the commission?
Thank you, Commission. Thank you, Alex, for that presentation. I'm Travis Finn. I'm the compliance manager at Rio Bravo Rockland. We employ 28 people, like Alex said, but there's also an additional 100 or more people that get employed through our process, truck drivers, other people in the community. We've been in service for 25 years, like Alex said, providing a beneficial commodity to the community as electricity. And I just want to state that we agree with the conditions in the permit application. If there's any more questions, I'm available.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this issue?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Eric Otto. I'm the Program Manager with the Western Placer Waste Management Authority. We would like to get on record today that we have some remaining concerns with the conditions. The authority submitted a letter back in May of last year, and then a follow-up letter March, a couple days ago. And essentially our concerns are that the odors aren't fully being considered yet, fully addressed. So we appreciate staff's efforts here to put some additional conditions in regarding odors, and really do appreciate Alex's and Travis's work on these conditions, but we still have some outstanding concerns. And really what it is with the Odor Impact Minimization Plan, or OIMP, that is being recommended in the conditions. As Alex mentioned, that is a procedural document. It documents good housekeeping practices. It says how the operator should operate to keep odors in check. What it doesn't really do, though, is provide a mechanism for measurement, monitoring, and ultimately mitigation of those odors. The authority is, as Alex mentioned, proactively put a system in place several years ago to measure and monitor odors from our facility. And we did that for the purpose of being able to document what happens from our facility and develop very strategic methods for reducing odors from our facility. At the same time, we put a system in place where members of the community could report to us online in a very convenient manner when they experienced odors in the area. And then we could do follow-up investigations. What we found over those 3 years since we've had this system in place, and after investigating over 750 odor notifications, is that the odors that folks have experienced in the region aren't always a result directly of the authority's operation. They're often a combination of the other odor sources in the area. Rio Bravo being one of them, but also understanding that there's wastewater treatment plants in the area, there's other chip and grind operations, and there's obviously the landfill. We'll never say that we don't generate and produce odors. We certainly do, but we're working very hard to mitigate them. So what we are asking for is that the OIMP be modified, the condition for the OIMP be modified such that there is a specification that a qualified individual will develop and review that OIMP before it's approved. And then additionally, that OIMP will require some form of monitoring and measuring program that uses an industry standard for odor measurement, which is considered an odor unit. It's an internationally recognized standard unit for measuring odors. As you probably know, odors are very subjective. What one individual can smell, another may not. What someone may find objectionable, someone may find pleasant. This system is intended to establish some form of statistical baseline that this is when people would start to sense odors. I'm not suggesting that Rio Bravo necessarily put in the same system that the authority did. I will admit it was an expensive system, but I think there's other practices that the applicant can put in place that will allow them to collect consistent data as to what the authority is doing. That'll provide us a much better picture of what the odors in the area are and what people are experiencing. And really, this is not a push by the authority to force other businesses to achieve the same level of parity with our operation, not at all. In fact, what we think this is it's really critical to the viability of the industrial and agricultural uses in the area, in and around the Sunset Industrial area, to be able to keep going into the future, considering the development that's encroaching around us. If we're going to be viable, we have to take responsibility for those odors and other impacts from our operations. And this is a strong step forward in achieving that goal. Our concern with the hours of operation is really, again, tied to odors. And it's hard to understand that at first, but what we're looking for is a requirement or a limitation on when the applicant can process these materials to the 2 days a week, so that if the authority receives odor notifications from the public, and we believe that it could be due partly to Rio Bravo's operation, we can then discern by understanding those days of operations if it was a reflection of that shipping and grinding operation or something else. So that's what we're looking for, is just to be able to have a better connection of data there. I mentioned, the authority has done a lot of things proactively, and it's in our best interest. It's not completely altruistic, but we have to be a viable operation in the future. And we've had a lot of issues with the public, very emotional about they've bought this wonderful home and they can't enjoy it because of the odors in the area. And we've worked very hard to have an open dialogue with these folks. And if I may, I'd like to read an email that I received this morning from a resident who lives immediately south of our facility. And to give some kind of perspective to this, my board of directors will be meeting tonight to discuss odors that we experienced in January and February. We experienced a number of odors, many that we believe were from other facilities, but we've had a very ongoing dialogue with the public and have been engaging them and invited them to speak at this meeting. And so an individual wrote and said, "Thanks, you guys rock, and I appreciate how on top of this you always are. Thank you to all you for your hard work, especially on this sensitive issue. Smell has improved dramatically." So I think that kind of comment, we couldn't have expected that to happen if we hadn't taken the measures of defining what the real problem is with our operation, being able to identify where are the odors being generated, when are they being generated, and what are targeted measures for reducing those odors. And so we think it's in all the industry's best interest to employ a similar methodology so that they can be viable in the future. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
I do have one question, because I know you're similar in that you take in wood waste and greens and stuff, but also you do mulching on site, and you have other kinds of garbage that are different than vegetative waste. Now, when you talk about people complaining, do you break it down into that if I have 10 calls, that 8 calls are mulching, or the wet, damp paper other kinds of waste, or the greens? Do you have that information? I mean, when somebody comes in and complains?
We do. So on our online notification system, we request that the person filling out that application tell us when, date and time that they experienced the odor, the duration, the intensity, but also a descriptor of the odor, whether it's gassy or manure farm animal smells or acrid, earthy, musty, a number of descriptors. Those are always very subjective. What one person believes they smell, they have a tough time maybe describing that, but we do try and discern the distinction in the odors that they smelled. We'll then compare that against our odor monitoring system, which has a graphical representation. It shows an odor dispersion, air dispersion plume, graphically overlaid on Google Earth technology of the plume from our operation. And we can discern from that what was the source. Did that individual likely smell something from our operation or maybe an offsite operation? If it was our operation, what portion? So we monitor our composting operations, our landfill gas operations, our landfilling operations, and our material recovery facility operations all separately, so that we can best discern from that information what was the source of the odor. That allows us to go back and target that specific element and say, all right, in these conditions, this was the source of that odor. Now what can we do to mitigate that odor in an educated manner?
Okay, but my question was, what's the highest percentage? I mean, is it the mulching operation? Is if you trace it back to your facility and operations, which one of your 3 or 4 smell makers, causes the most problem?
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. I would say the most common descriptors that the public use are acrid and trash. Surprisingly, we have received comments that someone smells trash when they are upwind of us. Anecdotally, we put in a system a couple years ago to test adding a neutralizer to spray near the landfill to try and neutralize odors, and we put a cherry scent in there as a tracer so we could understand what the concentrations were. We asked the public through our system, let us know if you smell cherry. The only time they smelled cherry was when we weren't operating the system. So my point there is that what someone believes they smell and how they describe it may not always be truly indicative of the odor. But with that said, most of the descriptors that we receive are either considered acrid or trash.
How many monitoring points you have in your whole system on your site?
We have 4 dedicated, what are called electronic noses, and these are real-time sensors that are collecting data continuously. Then we also apply a fixed source. So we'll say an area of the landfill, for example, has a constant emission of gas, and we'll model that into the system as well. So the larger surface areas, even with small emissions, can cause a larger impact in terms of overall air emissions. So with those fixed sources, I think we have upwards of 15 to 20 on site. Those are mathematically modeled. We'll measure the flux or the amount of emissions from a source, and we'll put that into the model. Whereas the e-noses are actually taking records continuously throughout the day and adding that information into the model.
Thank you.
You had said that you do some suppression of odors. I mean, biologically, waste is going to put out some level of some odor. And how often are you doing this suppression sort of thing? I mean, and you have so many different sorts of applications of what you're doing with the product out there. I mean, from composting to obviously trash and burying it. I mean, it almost seems physically impossible to remove odor from all of those operations. And so how do you do that?
Well, I guess I should start out by saying that we acknowledge that we have odors from our facility. You're absolutely right. It's just part and parcel with the type of operation that we run. Secondly, we will never fully eliminate odors. It just really can't be done with that nature of operation. Our goal is to minimize and mitigate those. So we have a number of tools in our toolbox. I mentioned the misting system. That was a perimeter misting system. We tried that for a while. We looked at our odor monitoring system. It didn't seem to have a significant reduction in the actual odors, and so we said instead of going forward with that, we didn't expand it. Right now, we're taking that neutralizer, we plan on applying that to all the residual waste coming out of the material recovery facility that will ultimately be disposed. That's the largest quantity of product that we landfill each day. So our hope is by inoculating a majority of the waste with a neutralizer, that may lower the odor threshold from the open operation during the day. With landfill gas emissions, that gas that just, the little bit that can perk through the surface, we're doing an early closure project on a portion of our side slopes of the landfill. We're actually putting down a plastic membrane that will help keep emissions from making it into the air and allow us to pull more aggressively on our gas system. That's something that we're putting in proactively, probably 20, 25 years ahead of when we would be regulatorily obligated to do so. We're also doing a composting pilot study with food waste. So we're doing some in-vessel composting of food waste, not the open windrows that you may be familiar with at our facility, but an enclosed container that's passing air through that system with a filtering system to compost that food waste. Our hope there is not only will we be diverting that product from the landfill, but that it will reduce the odors that are associated with something as odoriferous as food waste. So we have a number of projects that are kind of in the works, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we may never get to the point where you say there aren't any smells coming from our operation.
Well, I guess as a follow-up question, this facility, Rio Bravo, is primarily they're wood material. And how can you suppress, if there's an issue there, how do you suppress that? I mean, I don't understand. They could put misters up like you did to try to neutralize the smell as it leaves, but I don't know if that's going to get rid of it. So do you have a suggestion of how they get rid of any odor that might show up from wood products?
I hate to, sit here and try and come up with solutions for that, but I can say that from my experience, and I've been down in that area now for 16 and a half years working for the authority, so I have experienced the odors from Rio Bravo. I don't always find them unpleasant, but I've experienced them. And I would agree from what Alex said and what from Travis said, it is from the stockpiles. It's not from the actual boiler operation. But possibly minimizing the size of those piles as reasonable. I know that they apply water to knock down the dust, but that can sometimes exacerbate the problem. Essentially what you're having is an uncontrolled composting operation of that organic material. And so on the surface, maybe there's not much of a smell, but when they cut into it to start moving that product, underneath the surface, it started to go anaerobic. It's lack of oxygen, and it's composting, and that's what I believe could be generating the odor. I think it probably makes more sense to have someone who is well qualified to go out and do a study of what are the odor sources and document them, quantify them, and that may actually help better educate decisions for mitigating the potential for odor. Not eliminating, but reducing and mitigating.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else like to comment?
Good morning. Tom Lee from Bryan Cave on behalf of the applicant. And with your permission, we have a very late comment letter in response to the Waste Authority's letter from yesterday. I can hand it to the clerk.
Yeah, go ahead, and Kathy.
So I just wanted to address a few points that we anticipated that the Waste Authority would make. First of all, I think it's a great sign to hear them say that they do not expect parity, because I think a fundamental issue that we've been running into is that trash and trees have very different odor levels, as we all know, and therefore the odor mitigation and odor monitoring plan that would make sense for this facility is very different than what would make sense for a trash facility. The first point that I want to address is the fact that the Trash Authority just referred to this as a composting facility. And under the regulations in California, as Alex pointed out, that's actually not the case. And as you'll read in the letter, the facility is specifically exempt from the composting materials handling requirements, which is what would trigger odor monitoring requirements. So there's actually no regulatory basis to impose any odor monitoring on this facility. As you correctly pointed out earlier, there's no direct linkage between the proposed project and the odor issues at the facility. In fact, as you'll read on page 6 of Alex's report, this project will reduce the odors from the facility. So the impact of this project is that the fuel piles will be smaller, that whole waste, whole trees, and vegetation will be delivered to the facility, and that those can be processed on site as needed to be input into the fuel stream rather than having to have the whole fuel stock be in the fuel piles. So the idea being that if there's any concern about composting happening in the fuel pile, the overall volume of that pile will be smaller because we can grind whole trees as needed with this proposed grinder. So the planning department has concluded that this is likely to reduce overall odors. The other important thing to remember is that the fuel pile is cycled on a first in, first out basis. So they don't just take from the top of the pile and leave the bottom layers to slowly compost over time. They take the bottom layers out, and that's what's combusted first. Based on our modeling and our estimates, they believe that the fuel is not on the site for longer than 7 days. If you look at the regulations regarding composting facilities, 7 days is an important number for certain regulations. It's at the edge of what can lead to the composting process. So the point being, the fuel, even under the current operation, is not really on the location long enough to raise composting concerns and therefore odor concerns. So essentially, Rio Bravo is fine with the proposed conditions. We agree that instituting an OIMP makes sense. We have no objections to the way that it's currently formulated. But given the fact that there's no regulatory requirement, that there's no linkage to between the project and the odor concerns, and in fact this will hopefully reduce any odor concerns, and the fact that trash odor monitoring and mitigation and tree odor monitoring and mitigation are, apples and oranges, we think that the current proposal is sufficient, and that we respectfully request that the Commission approve it. But I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
I guess what I heard earlier is wood waste and CD, whatever CD is, I don't know, but could you describe the products that are coming in to go through the grinder?
I think Travis would be better suited to answer that than me. But.
So the majority of our fuel source is urban waste, wood waste. That's either tree trimmings or agricultural material that's brought to our facility. C&D is construction and demolition from tearing down houses, and that material also gets brought to our facility.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Well, on that construction material, I was going to ask, does the MRF send some of their stuff over to you to get rid of it?
I'm not sure the current supplier list. I'm not the fuel buyer for the facility, but that is something that I can get for you if you need that information.
Because obviously they're taking in a lot of construction debris next door to you, so
I know in the
brought
past
some over.
Yeah, I know in the past we have purchased a lot of material from them. I'm not sure the current situation, the current relationship with them.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the Commission. Rob Sandman with the County Counsel's Office. I come before you today in my capacity as a counsel to the Western Placer Waste Management Authority. I'm not representing the county this morning. In the authority's letter yesterday, there were a few specific areas of emphasis which really get down to the technical nature of the data collection and the ability for the authority and members of the public to review that. I think as Eric pointed out, we understand the differences and distinctions between these two facilities, and we're certainly not trying to affect in any way Rio Bravo's ability to conduct its business. What we are trying to obtain through this process of discretionary permit is to extract out and tease out data that can be useful in the larger picture. And we've noted in our letter from yesterday that at a minimum, we asked that the commission require that the OIMP be directed to a person qualified to evaluate the OIMP. Right now, the condition is silent upon who that would be submitted to and the qualifications that that person or office would have to review the OIMP. And as we noted in our letter, that the key is that the OIMP be premised on industry standard protocols of data collection. Similarly, we are asking that the annual report that is identified in Condition 12 likewise include the production of data consistent with what the authority is doing. The authority has gone certainly above and beyond what it's been required to do to voluntarily install the ODATEC system. As Eric pointed out, we don't anticipate Rio Bravo installing that type and level of system, but we want to make sure the data is one that we can compare. And in terms of a specific condition, the authority is requesting that Condition 2 be revised, as we've stated in our letter, to specifically limit the number of days per week that the operation can be conducted. And certainly we understand if your commission is willing to go there, that's where the authority is requesting. At a minimum, the authority is asking that the sentence reading the annual report identified in condition of approval number 12 shall list all days and hours of operation. We think that's a key information takeaway here, so that when the authority and other members of the public are reviewing Rio Bravo's operations, we can have a very clear understanding of when the tub grinder was in operation, when the facility was in operation. The additional flexibility for 24 hours per week right now does not provide the specificity the authority believes is in the public interest to understand operations. I'm available for any questions.
I guess I was just having a thought when I was trying to look at the two proposals, and there's an air quality district in the county.
Yeah,
and I was wondering, it seems like, as at least I was reading it, that the condition directs us to them. And so I'm wondering, wouldn't they be able to, have somebody on board or somebody that would be qualified to review the information?
Yeah, I can't speak to the specific technical capacities within the Air Pollution Control District. Certainly, I don't believe they're present this morning. The authority would be satisfied with the condition revision to Condition 12 indicated that the OIMP would be reviewed, submitted to whatever office we would suggest, at least to be submitted, identified to whom it would be submitted. That could be the planning director, it would be fine with the authority, as long as it was reviewed by someone qualified to review an odor management plan. Right now, it's silent on that point.
Well, it's directed to the planning department right now, or
the OIMP is, as the condition is technically written, there's no submittal destination for the actual OIMP. The annual report certainly goes to the planning director. We are requesting clarification on those so we can have a clear understanding that the OIMP itself is a public record, and certainly the annual report's a public record.
See, I don't know if I heard all that. You said it's not directed to the planning director now?
Right now, Condition 12 reads, prior to issuance of the building permit, the project operator shall prepare and receive approval of an odor impact minimization plan. That condition does not state to whom the OIMP will be submitted or from whom that approval will be obtained. And we want to make sure that we don't particularly care as to what the destination of the initial submittal is. We want to make sure that the review and approval of that OIMP is from a person or office qualified to make that determination.
Could we ask staff for some clarification on that, why that was left that way?
In actuality, we are sitting over here wondering if perhaps either the Council for the Waste Management Authority or the manager of the Waste Management Authority might provide some clarification. I'm concerned about a condition that would state to the person qualified without any further qualifications of the person qualified, because it could lead to problems with how we enforce that condition. It would be helpful to know if there is a way of fashioning, if the Commission wishes to consider revising this condition, to fashion the conditions so that both the applicant and the county know who that person or entity would be that would review this plan. We simply don't know. Do you?
If I could, I know authority staff, myself, the project representatives and project council, I'm certain if we had a short recess, we could arrive at mutually agreeable language on that point.
Alex wants to come.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, doing some research after looking at the Waste Management Authority's most recent letter, and I took a look. Mr. Otto was kind enough to provide me a copy of the Waste Management Authority's odor impact minimization plan some time ago. And I did some research to see if there were other qualified persons in the area who would be able to prepare such a document. This one has been prepared by Integrated Waste Management Consulting of Nevada City. And in doing my research, I was directed to CalRecycle's website. That's the state website. And the same person has actually created a template, odor impact minimization plan, for CalRecycle. It's posted up to their website along with several other example odor impact minimization plans, and they are offered freely to local land use agencies and others who would use them and model their odor impact minimization plans from that. In addition, I don't see any reason why if staff receives an OIMP and is concerned as to whether it includes all of the necessary technical language and performance specifications, that we couldn't work with either the Waste Management Authority or the local enforcement agency who actually inspects composting facilities and enforces regulations. I do have access to both of those staff persons or staff in those divisions, and certainly we would reach out to them when we're looking at these.
Does it make any
documents.
sense, Alex, Richard's suggestion of the air quality control being involved in that? And Karen, you're saying no? Okay.
No, I would recommend they not be. They don't regulate odor, although we all perceive that as an air quality component. It is not within their authority, so no, I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just wondering if I should just bring the applicant back up, because we're talking about.
Is there anybody else in the public that wants to say something?
Yeah, maybe I'll get to that first. Is there anybody else in the public that wants to address this issue? Seeing none, I'll allow the applicant to come up and sort of respond to the last little bit on the OIMP.
I would just like to say that I met with the representative from Odotech yesterday, came out to our facility, and he's willing to help us put together this OIMP, as well as he recommended a product that they have currently called OdoView, which I'm sure is probably being used at the MRF, which is just a product of logging complaints and current conditions at the facility, and he's currently getting me a quote for that product.
So do you have any suggestions of who you would want to submit this report to? Because since they're saying that it's vague, since they're saying that's kind of vague, do you have any thoughts on
It says planning.
Yeah, I think it would just be submitted to the planning department.
Okay.
For review.
Could I make a couple of suggestions? And I'm not sure I know where the Planning Commission is going on this particular issue as to whether you wish to consider modifications of condition number 12 and condition number 2. If you do, couple of possibilities. One would be to take a short recess and allow the parties and staff to discuss this and see if something could be worked out of mutual agreement. The other is to consider continuing this matter. This has been on hold for a year. I think I probably speak for everybody in the room that it would be nice if we could perhaps move this along today, but it's really the Commission's preference as to what you would like to do at this point. And again, I don't even know if the Commission is considering, as a majority, whether you're considering revision. So that might factor into whether you want to take the
Well, I'm thinking if we just take 5 minutes, or if you need a little longer for you to talk to the applicant and come to a decision. Because otherwise, if it comes back to us, I mean, we'll just be here sort of off the cuff, you know, trying to come up with something that they don't agree to or whatever.
Before we take a little break, can I clarify one thing, please? The hours of operation for the grinding, the 2 days a week, just so I understand the issue here, as a facility, you're looking to pick those days to be the most efficient based on available fuel and what have you, and your needs, as opposed to designating them a year in advance and saying we're going to grind on these days? And I'm hearing that the Waste Council would like you to identify those days up front. Is that not correct?
On behalf of the authority does not particularly care which days of the week, Monday through Friday, are used within that 5-day window. We just want to know which days are being used. Their report needs to identify those.
Past tense as opposed to identifying them in the future.
Right, and as we've identified in our May 2014 letter and our letter yesterday, we are concerned about the way the condition is drafted now to allow grinding operations to be able to occur on a, quote, more frequent basis, but not to exceed 24 hours a week. We believe that opens up the grinding operations to a 5-day-a-week operation.
Well, if it's only 2 days out of the week, I mean, I can understand their position because it's completely different from what you do, because you just take stuff in and process it, but they have to bring it in at certain times and everything. And I don't know if, I guess it'd be up to them to say that we can guarantee that we're going to grind on these certain days or whatever.
Certainly, to clarify, that the authority is not here to, again, to dictate their operations. We want to know when they were operating for the purposes of this larger public informational issue that we are dealing with on a daily basis. We would want to make sure that both the annual report and the hours of operation are tied together, so there's a connection between the two, such that their annual report needs to identify the days and hours of operation. Right now, we think that there is flexibility in that condition to, again, allow a 5-day-a-week operation. We need to know when they're running.
But not to exceed 24 hours a week.
Yeah.
But again, there's no definition of what a, quote, grinding operation is, and we've used an old baseball analogy here. You know, a baseball game can go 3 hours long. The actual time of play is, 28 minutes or whatever. Is that only when the tub grinder's operating, or is it when trucks are coming in? There is no definition in the conditions of approval as they're written now.
I would think when you've got the circuit running and the motor's running.
Right, and we just need to know. It's the authority's position that we need to know when this operation is running so we can match that data when we review it for odor complaints that have come in and have a broader picture.
But it's more about them keeping a record of their operation as opposed to identifying it ahead of time.
Right, indeed it is, and we believe that if it's limited clearly to 2 days a week, it's very clear, when it's operating, that's something can be observed.
I guess what seems like what they're talking about is, a truck comes in with wood waste, and they grind it, and they put it in the boiler. But if in advance they have to identify which weeks they're going to, what days they're going to use it, then that stuff is going to have to sit around in the yard until the day that I guess they committed to doing. So it may be a while.
And I guess, piggybacking on that, really, if somebody complained today, you just call over and say, and they can look at their logs and say, yeah, today we're grinding, or no, we're not grinding.
We think an important distinction here, of course, is that Rio Bravo is a private company and the authority is a public entity. We're subject to different record review and record access issues, and we're trying to use the ability to have a clear picture in their annual report of when they were operating. And right now, we think that there's a great deal of flexibility.
Okay, maybe just to...
I think a record keeping, I wouldn't have any problem with them keeping a record if they ground 2 hours a day for all week, but as long as it's in the annual report, as you said, on the weekly report or whatever, I think a record can be kept. But as far as specifying the days, that's another issue.
It's not our request that Rio Bravo notify the authority, to dictate their week-to-week operations. We do believe that the staff report has indicated to your commission that this is a 2-day-week operation. We believe the way the condition is written, this is a 5-day-week operation.
Okay, maybe just to speed this up, let's get them together, and you guys can sort of talk, and we'll take a break.
I need a health break anyway.
Could you just declare on the record that we're taking a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, it looks like we're back. Do we? Yeah, I'll officially go ahead and reopen the meeting. And I see everybody's back from their consultation, so I'll turn it over to staff to see where we're at.
Arrived at a consensus on modifications to conditions, and those modifications would apply to conditions 2 and 12. Would you like me to go through and specifically list the additional
Sure.
language? Under condition 2, the body of the condition would remain as written, and after the last sentence ending 24 hours per week, the following sentence would be added. The annual report identified in condition of approval 12 shall list all days and hours of operation.
Okay.
Then, pardon?
Is that just grinding?
Is that past tense or?
Yeah.
Is that past tense? Let me go back here.
Sounded like it.
Because it's an annual report.
It is an annual report, and so this would be at the end of each operating year. Yes, it is
Okay.
past tense, if that's, if I understand your intent correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Under condition of approval 12, at the end of the first sentence where it reads odor impact minimization plan, that sentence would be continued, would have a comma, and then would say, which shall be reviewed and approved by the planning director. Then further down, after the end of the second sentence that ends and complaint response protocol, that sentence would again be continued, and it would read, consistent with the ODO view, and that's capitalized, that's a specific program, or comparable odor monitoring program. So one more time, the end of that sentence would read, and complaint response protocol consistent with the ODO view or comparable odor monitoring program. And I believe that I have captured the totality of the agreed upon changes, and I see some nodding.
In fact, I'll just ask the applicant if you want to come up and say that's what you agreed to. Okay.
And is auto view, is that the auto view, is that the other program?
That is a specific industry program, yes.
Thank you.
The authority appreciates the commission's and the applicant's consideration of changes. We have no further comments at this time.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll close it off to the public and bring it back to the commission for discussion or motion.
I'm glad to make a motion.
Okay.
First, I'd like to make a motion that we determine the project is exempt from CEQA, existing facilities in Class 3, new construction or conversion of small structures. Second, adopt findings determining the project is consistent with the goals and policies of the Placer County General Plan and Sunset Industrial Area, and approve the conditional use permit with the modifications to 2 and 12.
Also CEQA.
And what about CEQA? Did I not address it?
It's exempt from CEQA review.
Didn't I, wasn't that what I first said?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Okay.
exempt at the top. And so, again, approving the conditional use permit with the modified changes to 2 and 12, and subject to the conditions of those conditions.
Second?
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Roll call?
Mr. Sevison's absent, Mr. Gray's absent, Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Riccucci?
Yes.
Mr. Denio?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. If anyone should appeal, the time to file is 10 calendar days, and the appeal fee is $546. And with that, thank you. And that's our meeting. So I guess our next one's going to be up in Tahoe.
Yep.
DJ's going to call the ski resorts and tell them.